Conrad Hale had been a corporate investigator for 14 years. His entire career was built on one skill: finding what people tried to hide. He was calm under pressure, methodical under stress, and patient when every instinct screamed to move. He thought those same qualities made him a good husband. He was wrong about that last part, and it took 11 days of sitting across from his wife at dinner, watching her laugh, watching her lie without knowing she was lying to him, to understand just how wrong he'd been. It started on a Tuesday morning between his second cup of coffee and a conference call he'd been dreading all week. Simone texted him that her boss Garrett wanted the whole team in Nashville for the weekend. She'd be back Sunday night. Love you. Conrad read it 3 times, typed back, have a good trip, and meant every word, because he already knew. He had known for 11 days, and in those 11 days, he had quietly, carefully, and completely built a picture of the truth before making a single move. Simone and Conrad had met 12 years earlier at a fundraiser for the Atlanta Community Food Bank, was in a green dress, arguing with a caterer about a dessert table, and she was completely right in the argument, which Conrad found immediately attractive. They were married 9 months later at a small ceremony south of Atlanta, surrounded by 60 people who genuinely loved both of them. The first 8 years were real. Not a performance of goodness, actually good. They traveled, had dinner parties, argued about things that mattered, and let go of the things that didn't. They lived in Decatur, in a house with old trees and neighbors who knew each other's names. Simone worked in corporate communications for a mid-size healthcare company in Midtown. Her boss, Garrett Whitfield, had been her direct supervisor for about 3 years when this story begins. Conrad had met Garrett exactly twice, once at a company holiday party, once at Ponce City Market on a Saturday afternoon. Garrett was tall, confident in the way men are when they've been told they're impressive for too long, with a handshake that was slightly too firm. His wife Diane seemed pleasant. They talked for 10 minutes about nothing and went their separate ways. Conrad didn't think about Garrett Whitfield again for a long time. The first sign wasn't dramatic. In Conrad's professional experience, they never are. About 4 months before the Tuesday text, Simone's phone habits changed. She started placing her phone face down on the kitchen counter. For 11 years, it had lived face up on every surface she set it on. She was not a secretive person. She once left her email logged into his laptop for 2 weeks, and neither of them thought anything of it. The face-down phone was new. Then came the late calls. In communications, after-hours crises happen. But now it was 3-4 times a week, with the office door shut, which she also hadn't done before. And something smaller than both of those things. Simone stopped asking about his day. Not dramatically, not in any way anyone else would notice, but for 11 years it had been a ritual. And she'd ask before he even set down his bag, and she'd actually remember what he'd told her the week before. Then slowly, she stopped. Conrad noticed the absence the way you notice when music you've been hearing for years finally goes quiet. 11 days before the Tuesday text, he found the hotel booking. He needs you to understand exactly how this happened. He was not going through her phone. He was not running surveillance on his own wife. He was at their shared desktop computer, searching a shared documents folder for a homeowner's insurance PDF. Their email was linked through a family account manager they'd set up years ago for shared calendars, subscriptions, and travel bookings. When he opened the browser, the last session hadn't fully closed. What was sitting open in the tab was a hotel confirmation. The Grand Hyatt Nashville. 2 nights, Friday through Sunday. Booked under Simone's name, with a corporate rate code matching her company's account. That was all consistent. What wasn't consistent was the second name listed in the additional guests field, Garrett Whitfield. Conrad sat very still. Then he closed the browser, found the insurance PDF, printed it, and went to make dinner. He did not confront Simone that night, or the next night, or for any of the 11 days that followed. What he did instead was exactly what he did for a living. He gathered information quietly, completely, and without showing his hand. In his professional world, there's a concept called premature disclosure. The moment you reveal that you know something, you lose the ability to learn more. The subject adjusts, destroys evidence, changes their story. Whatever leverage you had evaporates the second they know you have it. Conrad was determined not to make that mistake. So for 11 days, he was a husband. He made coffee. He suggested dinner at their favorite Ethiopian restaurant on Edgewood Avenue, and meant it when he said he had a good time. He sat across from her and felt something he still doesn't have a clean word for. Not anger, closer to grief, but with a hard edge underneath. Meanwhile, he went back through their shared calendar, the shared email for travel bookings, the records that had always been accessible to both of them. What he found, assembled carefully like a case file, was a pattern. 6 trips in the last 7 months, 4 of them to cities where Garrett had also been present at company events. 6 months of it, and every one of those months had included Sunday dinners and morning coffee and evenings on the back porch, and all the small furniture of a life Conrad had believed was real. A follow-up confirmation came through the shared folder, the one Simone had set up herself years ago, so either of them could access travel itineraries. This one included a room upgrade and a note from Garrett's assistant about his preferred corner suite with a park view. And one morning, standing in his own kitchen, Conrad glanced at Simone's phone charging on the counter and saw a text preview he wasn't trying to read. It was visible from where he stood. It said, "Can't wait for this weekend, been too long." From a contact saved only as G. On a Thursday evening, 3 days before the trip, Conrad sat down and composed an email. Not to Simone, not to Garrett, to Diane Whitfield. He had her email address from a guest registry Simone had helped organize for the holiday party years ago, still sitting in their shared drive. The message was short. He attached the hotel confirmation, showing both names, and the follow-up, with the note about Garrett's preferred suite. The message said, "I think this belongs to you. I'm sorry." No drama, no explanation, no cleverness. He hit send and went to bed. Friday morning, Simone kissed him on the cheek before she left. Her rolling carry-on made its familiar sound on the hardwood floors. He watched from the kitchen window as she put it in her trunk and drove away. He poured himself a second cup of coffee. 47 minutes later, his phone rang. He didn't answer in time. What came through was a 91-second voicemail. Simone was not calling from the road to Nashville. She was in a gas station parking lot on I-85, 22 miles from their house. And she wasn't devastated. She was furious. The controlled, high-pitched fury of someone who has been caught and is spending their first 20 seconds trying to make it someone else's fault. She said he had no right, that he didn't come to her, didn't even ask, just went behind her back. And then there was a long pause, and her voice dropped 6 registers, and something raw came through that she probably didn't mean to let out. She said Garrett had called her from the airport, that Diane had called him screaming, that Diane was driving to their house right now, that their kids were 12 and 9. And then, quieter than everything else, she said, "Why didn't you just talk to me?" Conrad put his phone down on the kitchen counter, face up, the way Simone used to keep hers. He thought about calling her back for a long time. He sat with his coffee and thought about what she'd said, especially that last question. Because underneath the fury and the deflection, that question deserved a genuine answer. The honest answer was this. He'd had 11 days of certainty building in his chest, and he still couldn't bring himself to sit across from the woman he loved and say the words out loud. Instead, he forwarded a hotel confirmation to another woman and let the explosion happen from a distance where he wouldn't feel the heat. He knew it, even sitting there. That was the coward's version of a confrontation. Simone came home that Friday evening, not Sunday. No carry-on, no green blazer. She sat down in the chair across from him, not next to him. Neither spoke for a full minute. Then she said she wanted to tell him the truth. He said okay. What she told him wasn't a simple villain's confession. She had been unhappy for about 2 years, not in a dramatic way, but in the quieter and sometimes harder way, where nothing is obviously wrong, but something essential is missing. They hadn't had a real fight in years. They also hadn't had a real conversation in about as long. They had become, in her words, very efficient at being married, and very bad at actually talking to each other. Garrett had started as someone she could talk to, and then it became something else, and she knew it was wrong. She said that directly. She didn't frame it as an excuse. She said she knew and kept doing it, and she was sorry. Conrad told her he had known for 11 days and said nothing. He was sorry for that too. Diane Whitfield called him 2 days later. Not to thank him, not to scream at him. She had a question she thought he might answer honestly. She asked how long he had known. He told her 11 days with confirmation, longer with suspicion. She went quiet for a moment, and then told him she had been suspicious for 8 months and kept talking herself out of it. He told her he recognized that feeling exactly. They spoke for 20 minutes. Before she hung up, she said she wasn't going to thank him, but she wasn't angry either. She said he did what he thought was right, and it was what she would have wanted someone to do for her. Garrett Whitfield was placed on administrative leave shortly after. Using company resources to facilitate a personal relationship with a direct report is not something human resources departments overlook. He was not Simone's supervisor for much longer. Simone took a leave of absence and went to stay with her sister in Savannah for 3 weeks. She and Conrad talked on the phone during that time, not the way estranged people negotiate through silence, but the way people talk when they're past performing and trying to figure out what's actually left. What Conrad discovered in those weeks surprised him. The thing he was most afraid of losing wasn't what he thought. It wasn't the house, the routines, or even the person he thought Simone was. It was the version of himself he'd believed in, the man who paid attention, who would have noticed sooner, who would have had the courage to say the hard thing out loud instead of engineering a confrontation from a safe distance. He had missed things, not because he was careless, but because there are things you train yourself not to see clearly when seeing them clearly would cost you something you're not ready to lose. 3 months later, they were sitting at the kitchen island with a mediator named Yvette, who had an office near Emory University. She asked them each one question without looking at the other person. What do you actually want? Conrad said he wanted to stop being someone who handles crises at a distance when he's afraid of them. Simone said she wanted to stop pretending things were fine. So often she forgot what fine actually felt like. Yvette wrote both answers down without commenting. Then she said those were compatible goals. Conrad still has the voicemail. He's thought about deleting it. He hasn't. Not to punish anyone. Not as evidence of anything. He was there. He doesn't need evidence. He keeps it because of the moment in the middle when the fury dropped and something real came through. The part where she asked why he didn't just talk to her. That question deserved a better answer than the silence he gave it. He keeps the voicemail because he's still working on that answer. And in his experience, that's where most of the real work lives. Not in the evidence, not in the strategy, not in the perfectly timed send button, in the things you were too afraid to say out loud, until it was almost too late to say them at all.